to call to order the October 28, 2025 meeting of the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission. I'll ask Maggie to read the instructions for those attending via Zoom, and then we'll start the meeting.
Okay, so we have the hybrid meeting participation protocols. This meeting will be held in person and via Zoom for public participation. Public comments may be made in person or remotely via Zoom, and interpretation will be available. Planning commissioners and staff will participate in person. During any public comment portions, attendees may use the raise hand feature and will be called upon and unmuted when it is their turn to speak. If joining by phone, use *9 and raise your hand, *6 to mute and unmute. The meeting will also be streamed on channel 27 on pacificcoast.tv.
Thank you, Maggie. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Del Negro.
Here.
Commissioner Rems.
Here.
Vice Chair Gorn.
I'm here.
Chair Ruddick.
Here.
We have a quorum.
The first item on our agenda tonight is approval of minutes for our October 14th meeting. Is there any discussion about those minutes or a motion to approve them? Commissioner Del Negro?
I'm willing to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Minutes are approved. Brings us to our first public hearing item. The commission is asked to hold a public hearing and receive public input from the public and to evaluate revisions to our draft housing element, which staff will present. Also to approve a resolution recommending that City Council direct staff to submit the Cycle 6 draft dated October 2025 to the state. And thirdly, to adopt the CEQA mitigated negative declaration attached here. And Director Lako, I believe you will present to us.
Yeah, I will. And I was planning on keeping my presentation very short. This is the 5th time this has come before you. I think you're all pretty familiar with it. So I was just planning on highlighting the major changes in this draft. So just a little background. For the housing element, last time we came before you, there was the outstanding issue of Measure D and how HCD would consider that. And since that time, HCD staff and Coastal Commission staff have been in regular conversations to address some of the issues with how housing law gets implemented in the coastal zone. And they did specifically talk about Measure D and how it's integrated into our local coastal program. So, so we did talk with HCD staff, and they did request specific changes. In attachment 5 of your packet, all of the changes are highlighted, and most of them are quite minor, and they're really just they're HCD staff sort of ticking boxes that they need to tick in order to approve any housing element. And then there's the Measure D changes. The other thing that's new before you tonight is now we have an environmental document. So we have a mitigated neg deck. The mitigation is about biological resources, and the consultants that prepared that are here if anyone has questions about it. So we can bring them online. They're here virtually, I should say. So if anyone has questions about that, they are happy to answer those. I'll get into my presentation and highlight some of the Measure D changes. So one of the changes they requested, something that can be done sooner rather than later, is a code amendment change. So through the code amendment change, we would seek approval of a local coastal program amendment to revise the allocation requirements for ADUs and JDUs from a full allocation to some smaller amount, probably a half allocation. And we would look at reallocating unused Measure Ds for ADUs and affordable housing units by rolling those over to the next year. So those are where we've allocated and no building permit was applied, and the Measure D would expire if not rolled over. So those would be done through a code amendment. And then HCD also asks that we put a ballot measure forward. The soonest possible time we could do that would be 2028. The ballot measure would revise Measure D's downtown area as the area designated as the town center in our certified local coastal land use plan. So it would, right now those maps are slightly different, and then we would have one town center and downtown area as designated for Measure D. And it would also exempt accessory dwelling units, including junior accessory dwelling units, JDUs, from residential dwelling unit allocation limitations. So ADUs would be exempted from Measure D. This is what would go before voters. So it's not a decision that the Planning Commission would have to make or council would have to make. It would be a decision that the voters would make. Those are the two major changes that they requested. In addition to that, I sort of messed up on the wording in the resolution, and I want to correct that on this slide here. So what you would be voting on this evening is to recommend to the City Council that they adopt the mitigated negative declaration and adopt the 2023 to 2031, that is the sixth cycle housing element, dated October 2025, for review by HCD. And that is the extent of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, the consultants are happy to answer questions as well.
Thank you for that. Do commissioners have clarifying questions for Director Lako? Vice Chair Gorn?
So the ballot measure idea, that's something City Council has to do, right? That's something for the City Council to put on the ballot, not
That would
for the
be
city.
something that City Council would be agreeing to put forward by adopting the housing element, yes.
So if we're recommending this MND and the housing cycle the way it is, are we also recommending that they put that on the ballot?
You would be recommending that change in the housing element and recommending that council puts that on, essentially recommending that council puts that on the ballot, yeah.
So, but that's not our job. Like,
Well,
that's
it
the
is
city.
in fact your job, yeah.
What's that?
It is in fact your job as the Planning Commission to make recommendations to City Council.
To make recommendations, but not on a, that's a political decision that the City Council, that's policy, right? So we're not really saying that you should do this because we haven't talked about that at all, and it doesn't seem like our place to do that.
What you would be doing is recommending adoption of the housing element. And there are many good reasons to recommend adoption of the housing element. That is a part of the housing element. And council ultimately will have to decide if that's how they want to proceed or not.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand that a recommendation to put something on the ballot is part of the housing element?
It is, as it's drafted now, yes.
Could I ask, maybe to take a step back, and for some years now, we've had pretty robust debate about the impact of Measure D on, well, a variety of things, including the ADUs, and much stress was put on the difficulty of changing Measure D. But I'm curious. I'm not opposed to this idea, but I'm curious how the thinking evolved to where a code amendment could temporarily make the change to a half unit charge for ADUs and to allow the rollovers, if I understand it, for the period of a couple of years before a ballot measure could be considered by the voters.
I'll have Marlene speak to that because she and Catherine did a fair amount of research on that. So,
Marlene, I'm
Take it
sorry.
away.
I just wanted to say I have a message from Commissioner Hernandez, who cannot make it tonight.
oh, he can't make it now? He said he was running late. Oh, well. Okay.
So on the issue of the half-unit allocations, that's one that I haven't looked at the details as much on. I've looked more at the issue of rolling over allocations, but I know that my colleagues have researched both of those issues. And our take on both of them is that that approach, making those changes or changes that are consistent with the text of Measure D as adopted by the voters, that is not contrary to what's adopted by the voters. And so those changes could be made by amending the code without having a ballot measure that amends the text of Measure D itself. And then the changes that are being proposed, or that are proposed through this draft of the housing element, are ones that would not be consistent with the current text of Measure D, and that would therefore require a ballot measure to actually change the text of Measure D itself to allow for those changes.
Well, I'd like to discuss that more, but I want to be careful that we restrict ourselves to clarifying questions for the moment. So, yeah, Commissioner Donegro.
So I've been trying to wrap my head around the fact that we know that the ADUs don't count towards the RHNA as far as the low-income, income housing requirements. And yet we're also being asked to go back and include a modification of elements in Measure D to include the ADUs within our count to increase housing in the city. There's a conflict to me in the entire plan of what's being asked of us in this document in order to meet the RHNA requirements, yet this doesn't actually change, from what I can understand, our ability to meet RHNA requirements for housing. Can we have some flavor of why this is even an issue? Why did we bring up modification of Measure D to increase ADUs to not actually achieve a change in RHNA target?
Sorry. The housing element covers more than just the RHNA that you're assigned. That's definitely a big part of the housing element, and finding those sites and all of that is I would say the heaviest lift of the housing element. But there's also other chapters in the housing element that require you to look at other ways to find more housing opportunities and to find more housing opportunities that are more accessible to a more diverse population. So that's really where it fits into the rest of the sort of overall housing element.
I know that we indicate in the document, obviously, that that these don't count, and we're, I guess, somewhat saddened by this lack of counting of that and the hotel. I can't understand how maybe bringing that into the response in this comment, saying, look, we're going to go about this route, but we strongly encourage HCD and ABAG to start developing qualifying criteria that are more aligned with housing possibilities and actually achieving the goals that they want. There should be some response back saying, hey, we're going to do what you said, but we feel that this needs to change in the future. You have to consider these types of housing for cities like Half Moon Bay, where infill and doing large complexes may not be as applicable in a suburban environment. I mean,
Yeah. So, I'm just taking notes, and I noticed no one else had a question just this minute. So, some way to consider them as part of the RENA.
I think we'd be somewhat in a response saying, okay, we can modify D, we can increase our housing component. The lack of inclusion of this in our ability to do a target in RENA, where this is a very applicable in building an actual methodology to solving this problem, should be included in the future. And we'd
Okay.
strongly encourage them in the future to reconsider their position on them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Renz?
I'm kind of curious, I'm trying to wrap my head around half of an ADU, number one. And number two, has there been any progress with the state on their supposedly going to make a determination on this Measure D issue?
This is the progress that we made with the state. This is the determination that they are seeking. They had at one point said that they would provide us with a letter, and then they started the talks with the Coastal Commission, and this is what they reached. And they told us they would not be sending a letter when we talked with them. So this is it.
And I won't put words in your mouth, but if I understand the staff report correctly, there's been some informal feedback from HCD that we're moving in the right direction with all these changes to the draft.
Yeah, so this is what they asked us to do, and this is what we're trying to do in response. And they are ready to certify the housing element with these changes. What happens if this doesn't move forward is they have told us that they will adjudicate this to see if Measure D is even legal under all the new housing laws. And that's their approach, basically. So.
And just for the record, when they say adjudicated, what do they mean?
Take us to court, essentially. They would find a court to weigh the specific issue of whether Measure D is legal under all the new state housing laws.
So just to be clear, they would take the city of Half Moon Bay, the voters of Half Moon Bay, to court.
Yes. I mean, I don't know how all that works. I don't know if you can provide any clarity about what that would actually look like in terms of a lawsuit.
It's not something that I've researched. I'm assuming the lawsuit would, if a lawsuit, it would be against the city. I don't know that HCD could bring the people of Half Moon Bay to the city, so this to court. So the city would likely be in the position of defending that lawsuit.
But certainly the purpose would be to render Measure D as, the purpose would be to render, sorry about the mask. to render Measure D as illegal, basically, under new housing laws. The other important thing about getting our housing element passed, I'll just put this out there, is that by not having a housing element, we are not eligible for quite a few grant opportunities. And we are seeking a number of grants now through Public Works. So it's another thing to keep in mind. It does benefit the city to have a housing element.
Yeah, thank you for that. More clarifying questions?
Yeah,
Commissioner Del Negro, please.
I'm curious I'm looking at the first response to comment number 1 and the details we go into address the non-governmental barriers and constraints that are discussed in Chapter B, and wondering whether we go far enough in the explanation of some of those constraints fiscally, job losses. I mean, I know that a lot of the data in this document is well out of date. I mean, we're dealing with something that's from the decade before. We've had 5 years since most of this data included in all of our incomes and population growth rates, and we've seen a complete change in the last few years. So knowing this document's out of date is really hard to, obviously, for me to go back, read it in the context of when it was originally written. You know, we've had a change in growth rates, we've had a change in income, employment, things like that are not covered in here. At the same time, a lot of those fiscal constraints are really applying today, while they might not have applied as much under the old statistics. Things like loss of job opportunities, increase in taxes, decreases in people's fiscal ability to pay for housing. I just feel like maybe we haven't gone far enough in some of those elements in the statement that's provided.
You're talking about the first comment in attachment 5 on page C4 of the housing element?
Yeah. Feels to me like we can add more language here to deal with some of the more realistic impacts of how housing cost to build is going up and the ability of people to pay for housing is going down at the same time.
We can go back and add more language to that effect. HCD did look at this and they approved, their staff, at the staff level, they approved that language.
Sure. That to a point, if we've met the requirement on something, I don't think we should start creating new fires where there weren't fires before. But for a document to really represent the situation we're at, this does have some gaps, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm trying to just think through what the process would look like if we added more to that.
I would ask that you don't add more if there was not an issue and they accepted it already.
Well, one thing that we could do is in our cover letter, we can add information about some of the changes that have happened since the housing element, since we first started this process, and some of the things that we recognize are in the document that may not necessarily reflect where things are today. Does that sound?
Absolutely. I mean, if we can maybe mention the decrease in growth in population, the negative growth in population numbers, both locally versus the county, stagnation in job growth locally and in the county, and increase in costs that are going up with ongoing escalations in prices. And I would also, not just for the buyer, but also for the builder, these things are going up as well as interest rates, obviously, making it difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that's a great solution, is to put it in the preamble of a cover letter.
Okay.
Any further clarifying questions? Commissioner Rams?
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. On these clarifying questions, are we trying to clarify what's in the document or what the director just said?
Well, I think traditionally the clarifying questions are so that we as commissioners understand staff's presentation, and their clarifying questions will be different from in a few minutes when we offer our opinions on the content.
Okay, so there will be an opportunity to comment on the content. Yeah,
For
thank you.
sure.
Thank you for the clarification.
I had a clarifying question in relation to the prior question about the Measure D and this body proposing or pushing forward a recommendation for putting something on a ballot. The recommendation is that there's an evaluation of putting something on a ballot, not that we're standing behind a specific measure, language, or purpose, or change. It's just that something needs to be done to put it on the ballot to meet the requirements. Is that correct?
Well, the language that's in the housing element is pretty specific to first revising that downtown area and then excluding A-dues and J-dues from Measure D. So it is specific in that way. One of the, maybe what you're getting at is the language in the resolution could be more about asking council to evaluate that rather than making a recommendation that they do that.
I mean, I guess for me, it's whether I want to take a political stand and present something, saying, hey, you know, this needs to go on the ballot, or I want to say that putting this on the ballot meets a requirement of this document, and therefore putting it to the public to make a decision is a valued effort. Like, I'm comfortable with the second, but not the first. I'm not going to stand here and propose a measure for a ballot on the language and stand behind it as something I'm supporting. But I'm willing to support the idea of going to the public and saying, hey, this is being asked of us to vote on. We can do that. So I want to understand that the language is saying to City Council, we recommend the placing this in front of the populace for a vote.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty substantial question, and I think we're drifting a little from clarifying questions into deliberation. Before we do that, I want to see if there's any members of the public that want to comment on this. Maggie, do we have anyone online who's...
We have no online speakers with their hand raised.
This is the time for folks who are participating in the meeting remotely to raise your hand if you want to make any comments on this item on the hearing. So seeing none, we will not open the public hearing and instead go to deliberations on the part of the commissioners. You had Vice Chair Gorn and Commissioner Del Negro raise interesting points about the relative roles of City Council and Planning Commission in this matter. I personally, I'm in a place where I think it is a legitimate part of the Planning Commission's scope to look for ways to improve our overall housing element and the housing situation in the city and Measure D's role in that, and whether improvements to Measure D would help that. Not to mention the important political issue of getting this housing element approved by the state before relatively negative results could come from that. So I also am perfectly confident that the City Council will do what they, in their wisdom, want to do when our version of this goes to them. So I'm not, I understand the concerns about the Planning Commission taking that step, but to me it seems rational in this case that we could recommend that pass this resolution recommending the code amendment changes to Measure D, as well as the coming of the ballot measure in 2028. But happy to deliberate with you all.
One question to the chair. Do we need to open the public input to meet the requirements of tonight's meeting?
I don't think so, if there's nobody wanting to speak.
It's just that, okay, I just read that we have to actually have a hearing for public input. I just want to make sure that we achieve that goal. Okay.
Yeah, we
Maggie
haven't-
says you need to open the hearing and close the hearing.
Do we? Okay. The public hearing is now open. Any members of the public who want to comment are welcome to do so. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, but thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks for the technicality. I actually like what you're saying. I mean, I do agree that obviously we need to make a recommendation here. I just want the wording to be that in order to achieve the requirements of this plan, we need to recommend this to city council. Like, if you put it in the context, I'm totally comfortable with it. Instead of taking a political stance of, hey, like, we believe in this, let's do this. It's, whether I believe it or not, I don't think that's really what I'm ready to do tonight.
Well, I mean, we've worked on, you guys have worked on the housing plan for so long, and there's so much work in it, and it's so, I've seen so many drafts of it. I don't have a problem with with what's here. I think that sort of adding in last second, hey, Planning Commission needs to recommend to City Council that they put this on the ballot is really, like, we haven't discussed that. That hasn't been an issue. There have been certain times when, the Planning Commission has been presented with that before, and we've said no. And I just, like, to have this sort of sprung on at the last second is like, okay, and here's our housing plan, and maybe you just make a political statement as well to the city council. And I don't feel comfortable with that. I think this, Measure D was passed by the voters. And I'm really hesitant to make a recommendation to city council that they do something with something that was put into law by the voters. I just don't, I have a hard time with that. And I think it does exceed our bounds. I think saying, that we approve the housing element, and we would recommend that you approve the housing element is great, but I don't think that a political statement about a ballot measure belongs in the housing element. So I'd be really happy to approve all this work on the housing element, but I'm personally not really prepared to recommend to City Council that they put something on the ballot. I don't think that's really right.
Vice Chair Gorn, I'm sympathetic to that view. We've, in Planning Commission discussions about this over the last, 2 or 3 years, we've talked about this same thing. To me, it makes two things stand out here. One is that I kind of feel like the state is requiring that ballot measure commitment as part of this process. And secondly, it's not asking the city council to recommend passage of the ballot, but rather asking the city council to let the voters decide on this question.
Right, but so, and the big sword out there is that they're going to sue us, right? And I mean, if they want to sue the city for the voters for passing a ballot measure and saying that that's illegal now, then that's something that should be decided in court, and it probably will be if they continue, like they'll get this little piece and they'll get that little piece, and they'll keep pushing. And if you give a mouse a cookie, they're gonna want a glass of milk to go with it.
Del Negro.
So clarifying question on your position, Vice Chair Gorn. You don't have a problem with the reallocation of half to 1 to half. You don't have any, I guess, difficulties with the reallocation of ADUs on cyclical year, it's the measure proposal. Okay, great.
Yeah, so we've discussed all of that so much. And, I do have, I raised questions in the past, but I'm really willing to forego all that in the interest of getting the housing element passed. I think it is really important. I think that, I don't like everything that's in it personally, but I think it's such an important document that I feel like it really needs to get to and through City Council personally.
To the chair.
Please.
Does anyone here ever remember a situation where the state or a body of government at the state and county level has forced a city to put a measure on the ballot to meet their demands? Because that's what this technically is. We're being forced to put a measure on the ballot by a government agency that is for the state and county. And that does have some implications of, doesn't feel right, but I also understand the stronghold. We have basically the risk of the sword, the lawsuit, if we don't meet these requirements. And this is not new. The requirements for changes in housing elements have been very strong-handed across the state for a decade now. And they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to keep coming. So I think the balance of that does bring up some questions to me about, can I even remember a precedent where this has happened, where the government agency has come from the state and told the city, you have to put a measure on the ballot?
How would we feel if the Planning Commission approved a resolution recommending that City Council consider such a ballot measure?
Personally, I think the City Council knows the issues, and whether we put something in here or not, city staff is going to go to City Council with the same thing, and they're going to decide what they decide because they set policy. Like, that's their job. And whatever they decide, I'm good with. If they want to put it on the ballot, that's fine with me. But that's their job. And I think getting a recommendation from Planning Commission that we think that's just, great, and we think they should do that because that's really important, that's different than deciding it themselves. Like, it's the Planning Commission approval carries weight. And it's not just that we're approving the housing element, which I want to do, but we're also recommending that they put something on the ballot, and because HCD says we have to. And that, I feel like the state is kind of like being a little bit of a bully here, and I don't really like bullies.
Perhaps I could ask Marlene and Director Lako if you have a view on the importance of the Planning Commission recommending to the City Council to put in process that ballot measure rather than letting the City Council be free to do whatever it wants in that space.
Well, I think there's language we could probably put in the resolution that might get to your point. So we could change the resolution to read something like, the Planning Commission recommends City Council adopt the MND and adopt the 2023-31 housing element, and strongly consider the issue of including the ballot measure.
Yeah, or we could
before-
say,
Or something to that
we could
effect.
say that a ballot measure has been requested by HCD. The Planning Commission does not recommend or, what's the word, like.
Doesn't want to take a position.
Doesn't take a
Abstains.
stand on it. And so, but HCD has requested that it be part of the housing element. actually, can we pass this housing element without that being part of the housing element? Because I have a really hard time with that. Like, anyway, sorry. But I think just kind of like saying, like, I think we need to be clear about it and not sort of like, so I think we can say out loud what we think, which is that we don't think that is necessarily needs to be part of the housing element, because it's not. It has nothing to do with the RENA numbers and housing development.
Commissioner Del Negro.
Can we pull up the language that was in the actual response that asks for the Measure D? Can we pull up the language? I want to see very clearly what they requested. Was it, you need to put this Measure D on the ballot,
It's
you need to
attachment 5.
consider?
I think Maggie's going to try to do it. I think I'm looking for it here. I'm not.
City revisions to draft element in response, or response letter dated 20, May 20.
City revisions to. Yeah, you have it.
Program 6.8.
Okay, here it is, yeah.
Program 6-8.
Yeah, so it's very end. Oh, you got it. Can you guys see it okay?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
now.
So on the left, this is the exact language, the response we got from HCD in that second column. And on the right column is our proposed response.
Let me check to make sure it's exact. That's in a different attachment, just a second. HCD response letter. Let's see, program 6. Do you mind if I just read it to you?
Sure, because I don't see anything mentioned on their comment about Measure D at all, except for the very beginning about the JEDUs.
Program 6-8, annual review of residential dwelling unit allocation system commits to address constraints on accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units production due to Measure D allocation limits. So it's saying that this program already makes some commitments to address those constraints, including exempting ADU and JDUs from residential dwelling unit allocation limits. However, as noted in the prior review, the program should provide alternative actions with discrete timing if the local coastal plan is not amended to exempt ADU and JDUs from residential dwelling unit allocation limitations. Regarding alternative actions, HCD, in collaboration with California Coastal Commission, will follow with more detailed guidance under separate cover, which they did not do. They instead came to us with basically the language that's in there now.
So if HCD thinks that the Coastal Commission would join a lawsuit to get rid of Measure D, then HCD can do that. And so I just don't see why we're doing HCD's bidding in the housing element politically.
I'm still having a hard time finding where this is saying you need to put something on the ballot. Now, it may be somewhere else within the document, and feedback we've gotten previously says that.
Yes,
I think HCD has said that in the past. And I know that that has been sort of a city staff response to HCD in the past. And so maybe it's again a city staff response to HCD as like, here's a possibility. But yeah, however it got there, it's clearly like a
Director Lako has.
directed by HCD.
Director Lako, you have some more news about that?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Commissioner Del Nagro. I didn't realize you were looking for that specific language that HCD had written down in a letter, because they did not write that down in a letter. They came to us and told us that this is, when we met with them on several occasions, this was their request, that we amend the housing element in this manner for them to be able to move forward with it. And then I guess the other point of clarification is I don't think the Coastal Commission would join them in a lawsuit. Yeah, I think the Coastal Commission has really helped us in this as much as possible. And those
I think there was-
conversations that they
oops, sorry.
started with the Coastal Commission are what brought them to the table for conversations to begin with.
Yeah, I think they were hopeful that the Coastal Commission would be amenable to do this, and it became clear that that was not the case, which is why, in this letter that you put up before, it does threaten that they're going to get the Coastal Commission and together we're going to sue you and overturn Measure D. And I just feel like that's sort of like, not real. So it is their opinion. It is an opinion by a very, big agency, but their threat of a lawsuit and their threat of getting Coastal Commission really shouldn't affect what is our actual draft housing element, which is really pretty well done. So that's what I think.
The draft of the housing element that we're asked to approve tonight, does it make commitments about this ballot measure? I mean, I see the discussion of the ballot measure in the attachment 5, which you just read to us, but
Yeah, it actually says, well, like this is not where I want to be looking. It actually says that we would prepare a ballot measure for the 2028 election with a substantial public communications process that will revise Measure D by revising to define downtown area as the area designated as the town center in the certified local coastal land use plan, and exempting accessory dwelling units, including junior accessory dwelling units, from residential dwelling unit allocation limitations. So, and again, that is an agreement that HCD staff came to with Coastal Commission staff and brought to us.
And that was, sorry, the chair.
sorry.
That was captured in minutes and in some type of discussions and letters back and forth between, or that's just in oral conversations? that
Those
was
are
a demand?
conversations, yeah. I actually don't know how HCD and Coastal Commission staff conduct their staff-to-staff meetings, so I don't know what's there.
I guess, without this like documented history of understanding word for word, and them making commitments on paper towards what their expectations are, it also kind of makes me feel like the liability here becomes very murky, even still, not because the staff wasn't listening, responding. You guys are brilliant in obviously capturing the information requested. But to me, this is an indirect request coming with very broad implications and well above what I understand to be normal process towards creating measures. It gets a little harder and harder as night's going on here for me to really grasp, the legitimacy of being asked to do this. to recommend we put a measure on the ballot. As opposed to asking city council to evaluate whether or not, something needs to be done on this issue for a measure on the ballot. To me, that's a separate thing. Hey, city council, we're punting this to you because it's a political decision that's, while relevant to planning commission, isn't necessarily something we should be recommending, is that we put a measure on the ballot.
Yeah, as Vice Chair Gorn said at the beginning of deliberations, if ever there was a policy question, it's that one. I think I could live with the concept of the Planning Commission asking City Council to consider the idea. Even that seems kind of extraordinary to build into a housing element. But maybe these are extraordinary times. I wonder if we might approach this with a vote on a resolution to separate these questions into two resolutions.
Well, I think I might have some language. Here goes. PC hereby recommends City Council adopt the mitigated negative declaration and evaluate whether to include a ballot initiative in the housing element prior to adopting the 2023-2031 housing element, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sorry, Leslie, I missed in the middle of that what you were saying, just so I can have...
First, adopt the MND, and second, evaluate whether to include the ballot initiative in the housing element prior to adopting it.
So I think that sounds like a recommendation. And I would say, if you want to put something at the end of this resolution, we could say, in English, in addition, HCD has pushed to include a ballot measure, and the Planning Commission is not taking a stand one way or another on it. And that is pretty clear. It's part of this housing element that we're approving, but that we are not approving this, this sort of secondary issue. That we're approving what is the housing element, but this isn't the housing element. And I think we can make that clear.
Commissioner Del Negro.
I like where this is going, Vice Chair Dorn. The one thing I could think of is just, in addition to that, saying we leave it in the hands of the city council to make the determination.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a given also. But if we say that we're, I don't know what the language over here was, but it sounded like a recommendation. I think we should make it clear that it's not.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a part of the challenge is that HCD will require or would like to require that commitment to the ballot measure to be in the housing element. And I'm in favor of city council being the policy makers in this case. But that makes it a little bit awkward for which version of the housing element do we recommend. Well, surely we can work out the wording on that.
Well, I think we can just say that we recommend the housing element minus this ballot measure, and that a ballot measure is a separate subject that needs to be decided by the city council.
To the chair.
Please.
I will also point out that not only does the language go to the point of saying that we'll recommend a ballot measure, it also says that if the ballot measure fails, we'll continue to try to create other measures to overcome. I mean, this is basically just pushing. I mean, it's too, far. Do you want to try to reword what?
Well, I'm hopeful that staff may have some suggestions for some clever wordsmithing to capture our intentions here. I'm going to suggest, it's early in the evening, but I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break. Let staff work on that. During that break, we're back in session now. I suppose, so you folks were working on language to approach what I think you've heard from some of us about our intent to urge the council to approve urge the council to submit the housing element with making note of the need to consider the ballot measure. So if you have suggestions to us on
Yeah.
that language, we'd be happy to hear it.
We have 3 different options. I think Marlene's going to read the first one. And we don't have to read all 3. If you like the first one,
Leslie,
I want to
before
hear
you-
them all.
Before you start, could we just pause one moment? PCTV is just trying to catch us up online, and I want to make sure that everyone can hear this.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like we're good now. Thank you.
We're back.
Okay, so the first option we have here is that the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt the MND and that the City Council adopt the housing element, but that prior to adoption, the City Council consider whether to revise Program 6-8 to omit the HCD requirement that a measure be placed on the ballot in 2028 to revise Measure D.
What's the second one?
This one here. The second one is that the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt the MND and that the City Council adopt the housing element with Program 6-8 revised to omit the HCD requirement that a measure be placed on the ballot in 2028 to revise Measure D.
So a little bit stronger. And then the third one?
the third one would start out by removing Program 6-8, and then would read, "The Planning Commission recommends City Council adopt the MND and adopt the housing element, for review by HCD. The PC further finds that HCD has required the inclusion of a ballot measure in the housing element on which the Planning Commission has not ruled."
Would you read the first one again, please?
Yes, so the first one was, the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt the MND and that the City Council adopt the housing element, but that prior to adoption, the City Council consider whether to revise Program 6-8 to omit the HCD requirement that a measure be placed on the ballot in 2028 to revise Measure D.
Thank you.
So all three of them basically leave it up to city council. Yeah, thanks.
I like the first one. It's very clear and concise, and it maintains the language that HCD is pressing for, but makes it explicit that city council has to deal with it before making a decision.
Yeah, I concur that it captures the totality of what we've evaluated by going with the first one.
Commissioner Rams, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I would support that first recommendation.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gorn, any deliberation?
I'm good. I'm actually good with all three of them. Any of the three is fine with me.
So I'll be happy to make a motion at this point.
Please.
But I would ask a clarification before the motion.
Please go.
Are we going to talk about anything else in here, or are we going to do the motion first and then go back to this?
We should talk about everything first.
I'd recommend that if you want to deliberate on other parts of the housing element, that we do that before we vote.
Yeah, I agree. Can I bring up a few things?
You may.
And it just, I'm troubled by, Mr. Chairman, by, on page 242 and 243, on site 3 of the opportunity sites, 300 block of Church Street, with the apparent, maybe it was just inadvertent omission that the Archdiocese, if I recall correctly, at the city council, the letter was read from the Archdiocese that they opposed having anything to do with the site. And the pastor had a letter at that council meeting that essentially said the same thing, that they were opposed to inclusion of their site in there. And it's not clear in here that was brought up. The reader is left with the impression that the Archdiocese at one time was for it, but never against it. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that could be updated or clarified so that we're not put in a position where there may be some repercussions later on, or there may be other issues that result from maybe a mischaracterization, my words, of what I read here. So I'm just curious about that. And then I have a few other comments on the rest of the document. But that was the biggest thing that when I skimmed it and tried to make sense out of that, of all of the deliberations that went on and the public hearings and over 100 people at the council meeting and letters that were being written, none of that is included in here as being part of this, you might say, public response to the inclusion of that opportunity site. And so I think we need to get that flavor in here somehow so that it's a balanced presentation of that site. So I would just like to ask staff if that's possible at this point, or not possible, or how do we handle that?
Oh, I'll defer to staff if they have more complete comment on that. My memory from Planning Commission and City Council treatment of the earlier draft was that the state law requires the city to list opportunity centers without making comment one way or the other on what the intention of the landowner is at this point. So it certainly doesn't obligate any landowner who's mentioned on the opportunity list.
That is what the state
Let me make one more
requires.
comment. Okay, but it says right in here that the Archdiocese was for this. So that's where the reader is left. And in reality, the last that I heard from that council meeting and the letter that was read, the Archdiocese changed their position and were not for it anymore and deferred to the pastor who was against it. So from a clarifying standpoint, like I say, the reader is left with the impression that the Archdiocese is for this. And I think we ought to remove all of that or put in, the current position so that there's a balanced presentation of what is there.
Director Lako, did you have a comment?
Well, I actually can't say one way or another where the Archdiocese, came out on this and what the debate was at the time, because I wasn't here, and for me to make that change in the document, I would have to go back and actually research what the comments were and watch the meetings. So that may be a relic of an earlier time. I really have no idea.
Question to the chair.
We ask Commissioner Del Negro has the floor.
So the question I have is, was there a letter from the Archdiocese that you're referring to, Commissioner Raines?
Yes, it was
Okay.
read, as I recall, it was read at the council meeting, along with a letter from the pastor that I presume was submitted.
My statement would be that, well, instead of making a judgment or trying to reinterpret the document right now, it's just to include the letter as part of an amendment or as part of a element of the document. If a letter was provided to us as part of the public forum.
Yeah, I see your point. That makes sense. To wade in and try to recharacterize the history of that would be a big job, and frankly, one that wouldn't be important or a good return on investment, given that it's just an opportunity center and it isn't in any way legally binding.
Through the chair.
Vice Chair Gorin, please.
So the part that Commissioner Rems is talking about is, it defines some of the history, and then to sum it up, it says identification of the site as an opportunity site does not restrict the church or a private party from seeking to develop the parcel for any other allowable use. And that the city hasn't received any kind of coastal development permit application for any development, school, or other building on the vacant site. So it really just says that this is one of the possibilities in the future as just it's a parcel, is the idea.
Right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to what Chairman, or what Commissioner Gorin just said. I do have an objection to, on paragraph 3 on page 242, when the city embarked on identifying opportunity sites for cycle 6, met with the owner, Archdiocese, who indicated interest in future affordable blah, 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 and acknowledged the local parish would be part of the conversation. That leaves you with the impression that they're supporting what's going on here, and they actually either changed their mind or they took a different position to that stand, and it's not clarified here. That's my point. Because it gives you a one-sided, like, oh, they're for it, so let's move forward.
I'm sure that's not the intent of it, to indicate that.
Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification, and if that could be either modified or somehow supplemented. Attaching the letters would be great, and maybe just a footnote that says, see a different position or something
Yeah.
with, see the footnote,
Of
see
course.
the letters, you know.
Director Lako, is that an easy thing to make happen? Director Lako, is that an easy thing to make happen, attaching the letter to alleviate Commissioner Rem's concern?
I don't know if such a letter exists, but if it does, I believe that Maggie and I could take a look for it and see, and if it exists, we can attach it. It might be attached as a cover letter in the same way that we addressed the comment from Commissioner Del Negro earlier. Might be the easiest way to do it. Okay.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Rems?
Just a few more things. So you're going to look into that. That's good. Now, on page 243, I'm just kind of confused if this is a typo. It refers to cycle 8. Last paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line up from the bottom, 6th line up from the bottom. At the right-hand side, it says cycle 8. City is retaining the site as an opportunity site. Section has acknowledged that cycle 8 represents an 8-year horizon.
It's probably cycle 6.
Is that just a typographical?
Yeah, I think that's just a typo.
Okay.
All
And
the
then-
housing elements are 8-year
And then
cycles.
lastly, when I was looking for, I'm not sure how it was characterized, Exhibit 5 or Attachment 5. I think it's actually Attachment 3, so there's a disconnect there in the table of contents and the actual labeling of the attachment.
The attachment to the meeting materials today?
Say again?
Are you referring to the attachment to the meeting materials for today?
Yeah, and there's
Okay.
588 pages that I haven't completely read.
So you were saying that attachment 3 was mislabeled? Is that,
I think so. I
Oh.
think it's more of a, why don't you take a look at that?
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other deliberations? Commissioner Del Negro, you had been brave enough to volunteer to make a motion, I believe.
I am brave enough to volunteer the motion, and I cannot read that from this angle, but I will angle over.
An extra degree of difficulty.
If you're ready. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt the MND and that the City Council adopt the housing element, but that prior to adoption, the City Council consider whether to revise Program 6-8 to omit the HCD requirement that a measure be placed on the ballot in 2028 to revise Measure D.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did you want to comment, Commissioner Rems?
I don't, I'm ready to vote, Mr. Chairman.
Maggie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Del Negro,
Yes.
Commissioner Rems,
Yes,
Vice Chair Gorn,
Yes, please.
Chair Reddick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you all. Item 1B on our hearing tonight is for us to receive a briefing from Director Lako on the progress of the project to develop the local coastal plan implementation plan.
Okay, Maggie pulled that up for me. Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, so as you're aware, the 2020 LUP was passed a little while ago now without an implementation plan in place. And there were some measures that were taken to make sure that we'd be able to get by without an implementation plan. But it has been a bit of a struggle, and getting an implementation plan passed has been a priority for a while now. So we have a grant from the California Coastal Commission to help us with that update, and we also, council has set aside some additional funding for that update. So I was going to take you through, I don't want to walk you through exactly what's in the staff report, every task, but I wanted to sort of go through some of the highlights and some of the places where I think the Planning Commission, having the Planning Commission weigh in and participate will be most important. And I guess the other thing I'd like to say before I start is that this is really not just the implementation plan, but all parts of the code that really affect planning permits. So not every planning permit is included in the implementation plan. And really the major objectives for this are to develop the zoning and the procedural codes to effectively implement the LUP, to incorporate procedures for complying with new housing laws, and to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our municipal code related to planning permits within and outside the implementation plan. One of the early major tasks is to conduct an analysis of the full scope of the updates and to create a phasing plan. This is going to be a pretty major overhaul of our code, so there's really not going to be any good way to do this and in bulk. So some of the first tasks are to conduct some analysis and identification of the codes that we're going to update, to develop that framework and phasing plan for project completion. And then after we take those initial steps and we have a framework to bring that to the Planning Commission with a staff report and a presentation and get your input there. And that would be the full Planning Commission for that. One of the other major tasks, which is very much related to how the project is phased, is the outreach and engagement plan. And in this slide, I just took everything from the staff report that we want to accomplish here with the outreach and engagement, which is a lot. Basically, what I'm trying to show here is that we really want to be inclusive in our engagement here. What is especially important, I think, for this project is having a stakeholder advisory group or a series of focus groups where we can really bring in a diverse group of community members to weigh in on this. And then a technical advisory group, so individuals with more technical expertise. So the technical advisory group would be an ongoing working group. I would imagine that we would have a person from our architectural advisory committee. It would be great to have a couple planning commissioners. We'd have a staff member from the Coastal Commission. And we would probably have someone from our Public Works Department. So people that are experts in our land use plan and can and provide good guidance on this. We would also consider a survey. A survey is really nice for a project like this because you can reach more people and you can get something close to empirical data, which is always really helpful. It would also be a good way just to get some feedback on our permitting services in general, too. And then the other major components are Planning Commission and City Council public hearings. So there would be multiple public hearings over the phasing of the project. And the schedule for the project, the first part of the schedule is pretty easy to predict, and that is to hire a consultant and complete the outreach and engagement plan and complete the framework and the phasing plan. And that would bring us through October of 2026. The second part of the schedule is a little more difficult because we don't know what the phasing is going to look like yet. I mean, I have some ideas, but I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So after that first phase, we will also start our CEQA document. So for LCP amendments, a CEQA document is not required, but because we're also updating other sections of the code, we will have to do a partial CEQA document. And then generally for our code updates, what I expect is that we will bring eventually and in phases, but we'll have code updates, draft updates to the zoning code, the zoning maps, our associated ordinances, that all of this will be consistent with our LUP. And this includes, and this is important to the Coastal Commission and our grant, it includes our policies related to coastal hazards and hazard adaptation, resiliency, social equity, and environmental justice. Our housing element, what will be then our new safety element, fingers crossed, right? And new housing laws. So we also, in that mix, we have to allow Coastal Commission staff 6 weeks to review. Every time we submit an LCP amendment to them, they need 6 weeks to review it. So for each phase of the project, we have to include those 6 weeks. And then really what we're looking for in our new code is something that, where we have standards that are either quantifiable or objective where applicable. And we're using concise text, tables, and diagrams, which we have in some parts of our code now, but we really want to make that the standard going forward. A little less wiggly interpretation. So, and so the schedule for that, the rest of it brings us through to December 2027, and that is when our grant will expire. So we definitely want to have the implementation part of the phasing up front, and any other things like our tree permits and our sign permits and our architectural and landscape review code, that those will definitely be part of the third phase, just to make sure we satisfy the requirements of the grant. So that's what it's looking like, and I would love to hear any feedback that you have.
Well, thank you, Director Lako. Are there clarifying questions for Director Lako? Vice Chair Gordon?
I do have one. So I get the need to have our code conform with state law, like that's a big one. But then I was looking at this and trying to figure out if there's anything in particular that you're trying to fix. And at first I thought maybe it was the permitting, smoothing out the permitting. But I can tell you, like, especially with the online permitting system, people are loving how much easier it is. Seriously. I've heard it from multiple people.
Really nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, but also when people apply for something that's outside of the city, they know it's going to take forever. But when they apply for something in the city, it doesn't. And so I think that's actually a change in the last, 3 years, two or 3 years. But the online permitting system helped a lot too. So thank you for that. But so if it's not necessarily streamlining permitting, I'm trying to figure out what's the main thing you want to fix? Like why is the fix here? Thank you.
So, yeah, well, there's so much there. Where do I start? Well, right now we have zoning designations that do not match the designations in the LUP. So that's a big one. In fact, that's a huge one, and it also requires a fair amount of mapping. We also have zoning designations that are much more general in the LUP than they should be to implement them on a permit basis. So, a land use plan is really a policy document, and it's sort of usually kind of up here, and then the code gets into the nitty-gritty where, you're looking up very specific things about each type of development. And we don't have that available yet for a lot of the newer parts, newer zoning designations that were incorporated into our LUP. So there's that as well. And then a common practice in most cities is where there's a part of the code that needs interpreting, but you're not ready to do a code update, you write out a zoning officer's interpretation of the code so that you're applying it consistently. And you keep that in a file, and everybody applies it that way. But you don't want to rely on that for very long. And so we have a long list of those interpretations at this point that we need clarification on, that's actually in the code and not in a separate written document. So, yeah.
Okay. So all of that is it's a little esoteric. Like the zoning and the code implementation, not something that most people deal with. Wondering about the survey, like why is the survey in there? Like what would you survey people about? What are you trying to get from them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The survey is, the benefit of the survey would also be generally about our procedures and how they might be improved too. So it wouldn't be, there would be some parts of the survey that would be specific to our code, and we would, I'm sure we could get benefit, especially by sending that survey to builders. But part of it would also be just about the procedures and the process in general. So it's a little outside the scope. You nailed it on that one, yeah.
So survey would be more for people in the business, basically, in government and in, construction and that kind of thing.
Or any homeowner.
People who deal with the code.
Yeah, any
Yeah.
homeowner who's been
Okay.
through the permitting process.
Okay, thank you.
I will reiterate that I really love that comment because I have talked to quite a few people who have had projects recently who have a lot of feedback on some things like the consultants for evaluating their permitted work. So I think going and getting some surveys of people who've just completed projects would be highly valuable for where we can improve. I do like hearing that. I just want to comment on that positive.
Commissioner Rems, do you have a clarifying question?
No, I would just like to volunteer for what the director said. They're looking for a planning commissioner or two. And perhaps with my background and experience, that may be helpful to look at some of this stuff. Doesn't mean we're going to change it or anything. It just means we're going to look at it, I guess,
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah. So
Any other clarifying questions? And ask Maggie if there's anybody who wants to be heard.
There are no online speakers.
I hear some crickets. The public hearing is closed, so we can deliberate on this. I thought when you were talking a moment ago about the survey that, yeah, feedback from all of the city's stakeholders is always welcome. I took to heart, though, the deadline for running out of the grant in 2 years, so I'd warn us to guard against feature creep and make sure that we don't get too excited by the opportunity to hear from people on a whole number of topics and wander away a little bit from the focus. The other thing that I hope is, I'm not sure there's anything we can do about this, but I hope that the state housing laws are not the moving target in the next 2 years that they've been in the last 2 or 4 years, because that's going to make it difficult to do, and potentially it could make it difficult to do an implementation plan. I guess that the city subscribes to some service where we know about legislative initiatives in Sacramento that are going to affect us or have the potential to affect us.
Yeah, well, I mean, we learn several different ways. We have subscriptions, to track legislation, but when it's specific to housing, we also have 21 Elements, which is a fantastic resource, and they're not just tracking it, they're helping us interpret it and figure out what it actually means. And of course, then it's always different in the coastal zone.
Any other comments? I think the only thing I was reading on the objectives with what you have written here, when we talk about climate adaptation policies and we focus on fire safety for vegetation, obviously there are still risks locally of tsunamis and, of course, rain issues as well. Is that something that will also be incorporated as safety, not just fire?
Yes, yes. So it's something that's already addressed in the LUP. And so our job is going to be to figure out how to incorporate that into our code. And then there's additional codes that are changing that we're also going to have to address. And those are mostly in the building code, but they will definitely affect projects as they go through the planning process too. So in the most recent set of state fire maps, you're probably familiar with this, for the high wildfire severity zone, a lot of the city of Half Moon Bay is in that zone, and even the downtown area. And so there are there's new code that is not in effect yet, but will probably be very restrictive about.
I guess I bring this up, I know that I had a conversation with another commissioner at a prior meeting about sustainable development with Rick Hernandez when he was present, and I bet he would be remiss not having the opportunity to make sure that things like materials for that purpose of safety are included in that conversation. So it sounds like we're not just talking about vegetation for management of fire, but also building materials that are fire resistant and designs that are fire resistant. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other comments? Commissioner Rems?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add that I think it's a good idea to periodically, look at the codes and other things. Doesn't mean you're going to change them, but it helps to, purge that which is no longer useful and update or clarify or make better those codes that are kind of getting yellow around the edges or little cobwebs on them, so that we could, get things a little more streamlined and maybe cut down a lot of the, issues that come up before the council and the planning commission. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you, Mr.
So I think you're right about the aging of some of those. It's a doubly ambitious project here, given the new LCP that was certified in 2021, as Director Lyko alluded to. Would staff like the commission to acknowledge receipt of this briefing?
Sure. I mean, you can. We have no preference. Mostly, I just want to put it at the front of your minds and make sure that I'm keeping you informed as we go along.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
To the chair. I actually appreciate the conversation about obviously outdated codes and confusions in the codes that you brought up, Commissioner Rains. I wanted to build a fence recently. I went and looked at the codes. Fence codes are very confusing in there. It is not clear in our codes on what exactly meets the design standards. Yeah, they're very tricky. And of course, also, can you put an awning on a window if it's going to encroach within the space over, a boundary line of a property and the setback? And some of those things need to be clarified. And it seems to me like even with our objective design standards meeting last week, that some more flexibility needs to be added for the quality of our community's designs and features in houses. Thanks.
Yeah, a good point. We'd have those issues even without the new LCP. Would someone like to make a motion that we acknowledge the briefing from staff on this project? Commissioner Rems?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. The commission acknowledges. Thank you for that briefing. I think you're up for director's report too, Leslie.
Okay. Well, I don't have much to add, except that at the last meeting, I informed you about an upcoming director's hearing. So all three of those projects were approved. Those were all two-story houses with ADUs. One was at 495 Filbert, one was at 614 Myrtle, and the other was at 615 Grove. So those were all approved and issued.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Is that the end of your report?
That is the end of my
Okay.
report. Sorry.
All right, well, thank you for the brevity. Commissioners have any communications? Vice Chair Gorn.
So, Leslie, do you have that picture? I just went out to the Tom and Pete's. I mean, I took a bunch of pictures. I just held this for the, but I just sent you one.
Is this is about a communication? Is that
What
what
do you
this
mean?
is?
What do you mean? Yeah, this is my communication about Pumpkin Festival.
Oh, I see. So this is not about a communication. This is, you want to say something about the site at Highway 92 and
Yeah,
Cabrillo Highway? Okay.
but
I just, it's not an agendized item. I want to check on the procedure.
to put up a photo?
He wants to bring up what he was talking about at the last meeting,
Okay.
which is the project that they approved at the last meeting.
I don't really understand. I mean, I guess I could have put it at the start of our deliberations and reported as a citizen, but I also thought since we already dealt with this issue and that it's passed,
Yeah.
that it's not
It's a good question.
previously
I-
agendized?
Pardon.
What do you want? Well, I don't understand what the issue is.
I'm just bringing up a procedural issue. This is.
So you're
Usually,
wondering
if we're
whether
going to talk
the-
about something, we put it on the agenda, and
Okay.
that's sort of a Brown Act thing.
So
and
the picture that you don't want to show
It's up.
is of, there it is. That's just, that's Tom and Pete's. That's the restored field. That's the field that was restored.
When was
Okay.
that picture taken? Do we have a date on that picture?
What?
A couple of days ago? Okay. They did some seeding over there under the bridge. They did some seeding. Caltrans did some seeding under there, the hydro seeding.
Chair?
Maggie?
Yes, I would just like to point out that this item has not been agendized, so a discussion should not take place. If it was something that we did want to discuss, we should have perhaps added at the beginning of the agenda as an additional item, or, okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. It does raise the question on how substantial planning commissioners' communications at the end of the meeting have to be before they wander into the definition of agendized items. I guess they've been less formal in the past than this.
So when I had a comment about that Tom and Pete's area a long time ago, I appeared as a citizen, which everyone said I shouldn't do that, and I should just have it be part of the planning commissioner statements at the end. So that's what I did. So I don't actually have anything to say about it. It's just, other than that it's a mess. So there you go.
All right, well, yeah, it's too bad that's confusing. We ought to clarify that going forward.
I have two communications.
Please?
One is, I guess they had a opening taco day at the Taco Bell a couple days ago. Kids came home with a lot of tacos, and obviously it's very nice to see a new business in town that's, feeding more people at a nice rate of spend. The other one was that, obviously it's Halloween. Anybody mind, drive slow next couple days with the kids on the streets in the dark. That's about it for me.
Yes, a new business is always worth celebrating. Commissioner Rems?
I didn't know that they opened. I'm excited,
I don't think they're actually legitimately open. They just had a free taco day.
really. Every time I go by there twice a day, I always look and they've got the tape up or sign says not open yet or we're coming soon and all that. Anyway, I've just I'm signed up for tomorrow for some climate seminar in San Mateo. I don't know if any other commissioners are.
No.
No? Just me, huh?
That is the planning commissioner training that's offered by 21 Elements. I'm so glad that you signed up. I would be there with you, except I have my CERT training tomorrow.
Well, there's only one reason I signed up, because it's right next door to one of my favorite restaurants in San Mateo, Jack's Restaurant and Bar. And so I have an excuse to go there to have a beef dip sandwich. So
It's a
now
win-win.
now I shared that with you.
It's a win-win.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
May we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll be happy to make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll second it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The meeting is adjourned.